10 after, I think, is a good time to start. It gives our dinner people a chance to jump over here. Welcome to everybody. One of the first things we need to do, and I see I don't have to do it because I must have left my phone upstairs. Please turn your phones off as a courtesy to our guest. And you've probably all read the bulletin that we have 2 new COVID cases. So masks up over nose and mouth. And let's hope the day will come soon when we don't need them. I do have a sign-up sheet here, and we do have some openings for 2023. It's right around the corner. So I'll leave it on our wonderful piano here. You can step over afterwards and sign your name and join us and share your story. We each do have a story, and almost everyone has said, I don't think I really have a story. But you do, because what your life is different from everyone else's. Harriet, would you cover your nose, please? I'm sorry. Rules. It comes from being a teacher. You gotta follow rules. You have to be an example and do the same thing. I'd like to be without them also. Okay. We're ready tonight for a most interesting story. Manuela Bernstein has lived a different kind of life, far from where many of us were born and grew up. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions. I understand that there's a city in Romania that's also known as Little Paris. Bucharest, yes. Well, quiz question number 1, perfect.
We also have an Arch of Triumph, and it's called the Paris of the East.
Yes, Bucharest. I've done some reading since I spoke with you, and I found out that it's a beautiful, beautiful city.
It is.
It's a large city. The current population is over 1 million, but the metropolitan area is much larger. Just like in Chicago, we say it's 3 million, but the metropolitan area is 7 million. So you live in the capital, and can you tell us a little bit about your family? How many children were there, and what your father?
Yeah, my father was a musicologist and a poet, and he would participate as member of juries at various competitions of classical music. My mother was a teacher of Latin and Greek, but after my father's death, she became a research librarian. I have one brother who is 10 years younger. He is a computer engineer, and he lives in California, in Mountain View. And I had an aunt whom I adored, who is no longer with us. My family is small, so I can't add any more members that do not exist.
Okay, your early days, your early childhood was in Romania, in Bucharest. What was it like when you were a kid? Now we know that communism has played a big part in Romanian history. Were you aware or affected by the fact that there was a communist element?
I was. In kindergarten, there was a portrait of Stalin. And I was playing.
It was a portrait of
Stalin, yes. And I moved the portrait, and the instructor said, "You don't show respect towards Comrade Stalin." Immediately I got upset and I threw up on her shoes. And that was the last day with me in kindergarten.
That's an odd way to graduate.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Then I was in third grade, I was 9 years old, and we had a gathering of the Youth Communist Organization, and those took place once a week, and we were talked to by an instructor regarding social and political issues.
Was this like, I shouldn't
They were
compare,
called pioneers, but they were not pioneers in the sense of America. They were members of a communist organization.
I see. So was this like Hitler Youth in comparison, training young children?
Yes, not like Hitler.
No, I understand that, but the taking young children and basically brainwashing them.
Exactly, from the age of 9 to the age of 13. And at 14, you join another communist organization of kids between the age 14 and 18. And then, at the age of 22, if you were appreciated and interested in the student, you would join the Communist Party. As a Jew, I was not approached to join the Communist Party, and I wasn't going to, even if they had approached me.
So were you part of the pioneers, though, when
Yes,
you were
I
younger?
was,
It was
yes.
required.
Yes,
It was-
that was a must.
I see. So you were fed this information.
Yes.
Did you believe it? What did you do? Did you come home and talk to your parents about it, or what?
My parents were, in the words of the government, reactionary.
Aha.
They didn't believe in this bullshit.
Were they openly reactionary, or were you aware of it just because of in the house?
In the house,
In the
because
house.
otherwise you could have ended within 4 walls in prison. So everybody was very careful, and you had to watch out who you talk to, because, for example, the person that worked as a concierge was an informer for the police. So you were very, very careful, and there was a concierge in every building.
You lived in an apartment building?
In an apartment building. We had a beautiful big apartment.
I see. Now, so were you what we would call downtown? Were you?
Yes, I was very, within walking distance from downtown.
I understand that in Bucharest, they have the largest parliament building in the world. And I saw pictures of it, and it actually took a couple of pages, seeing a long bridge. You saw part of it and part of it and part of it. So, as a child, did classes take trips to these government buildings?
To some government buildings. Also, whenever there were celebrations of communist events, we were supposed to be part of the parades, and you would meet at the school, grammar school or high school, which you attended, and from there you would march down the streets with slogans.
Oh,
Yes,
are you talking like banners?
banners and actually speaking.
Speaking.
Yes.
Saying the
Saying the line of the party.
I see. Wow. Now, did you wear uniforms?
Yes, I wore a uniform, a white blouse, a pleated navy skirt, and a red tie. And I wore that between the age of 9 till the age of 13. After that, you wore a navy blue dress, which was worn over the dress or the pants you came dressed with from home. And the same thing had to be worn in phys ed classes. There were no bathrooms to wash, so we were sweating profusely during gym classes.
There were purposely no washrooms?
That was the rule.
Why?
Everybody had to obey. There were no reason given for a lot of the things. And if you talk too much or if you ask questions, it would have been bad.
So questions were not
No.
the thing to do.
No.
So I gather that even as a child, you learned quickly the respondent behavior, that even if something seemed strange to you, you didn't question it, you just were quiet
I
about
questioned it at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I was a reactionary even at the age of 5. But otherwise, complete silence. For example, I had a friend whose father one day was surrounded by workers from his office, and he told a joke. After that, he was arrested, and he got 5 years because of that joke. So generally speaking, you would not utter jokes because you never know who would listen and who would report you.
So did that make you nervous about your neighbors or saying things to your neighbors?
It made me very wary, and I didn't say much to my neighbors. There were neighbors I was friends with, and they were very nice. However, I still kept my silence.
Your parents taught you what
Oh,
survival
yeah.
skills.
For example, my father had to write article, poetry, criticism of classical music, and he had a typewriter. The typewriter had to be registered with the police. The typewriter was in his study, on his desk. It was his. He had purchased it, but it had to be registered with the police.
Were the articles that he wrote censored?
Yes, you were told what to say, and they were censored. They were read by one of the big ministers in the Communist Party, and they would check every sentence, every word. So you had to be very careful. For example, it was difficult for a writer to express feelings and truths because you're afraid to end up in prison.
Wow. All right, so not all right, but we're at the point where you finished high school?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happens?
I took the entrance examination because you had to take an entrance examination for college, and the preparation took 5 years, and I had to present, they call it a state paper that took a lot of research. And I got my master's degree in English literature and language. Later on, when I was here, I got another master's degree in Spanish language and literature and Hispanic studies.
I see. You were allowed to participate in higher education even though you were Jewish?
Yes.
Was that unusual?
No.
I
Anybody
I
would
see.
go to higher education.
I see. Sounds good.
Yes.
Sounds good. What, it sounds to me as an American you never lived like that. What were your living conditions? Was your father able to earn a living that would make it comfortable for you?
We lived very comfortably. We had a beautiful apartment. My father liked antique furniture, and that's all we had. We had paintings, original paintings. We even had a maid for some time. Sometimes, if you had a certain maid, you never knew what the maid would report to the police. But the maid we had was a very nice Hungarian maid from Transylvania.
I see. Well, she may have the same concerns being Hungarian
You're right.
that you had as a Romanian, because during that period of time, communism was spreading out, through countries in Europe. You mentioned when we talked before about your grandparents, that you would go visit them.
Yes, my maternal grandparents, my grandmother, because my maternal grandfather had died before I was born. So I would spend summer vacation with my maternal grandmother. She had a house. She had a little tub, and I would take bath in the little tub because I was 3 or 4 years old. And I had a very good time. I loved her, and her name was Bella.
That's my mother's name. It's a very special name in my family. So your grandparents, even though your grandfather died before you were born, were financially comfortable.
They were comfortable. My grandfather had worked as a clerk in a high position in navigation, because Romania had the Danube as a river, and it had started, through different countries, and the Danube was the last country where it flowed, so that from there it went into the Black Sea. And it was a beautiful scene to see this Danube going into the Black Sea, and the monument was called the Iron Gates.
Right.
And there were resorts there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So people would come there for vacations.
Yes.
Overlooking the water, right? And I understand that your grandmother's house wasn't far from there.
No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you went to visit your grandmother, you had a pretty good life. You went
Yes.
down to was it like a beach by the Danube, or was it a grassy area?
It was a grassy area.
Sounds beautiful. Okay, so you finished college, and what were your plans for the future?
My plans for the future was to leave Romania as soon as possible because I wanted to travel. And you couldn't travel to France or Italy or Spain. You just travel only within the margins of the country. Also, talking about passports, there were no passports as Americans know. You did not have a passport at home. If you were to go overseas, you would go to the police, they would take pictures, you would be given a passport, and the moment you came back, the passport was taken away and left to the police. Also, you had passports for the city you lived in. For example, as a child, I did not have a passport. But when I grew up, I had a passport for Bucharest. If you got a job, let's say, in a city by the Danube, another city, you had to lose your passport for Bucharest, and you would get a passport for the city or the town where you worked or where you lived at the time.
So everything was very controlled.
Yes,
And
they
then
were
you-
called internal passports.
The government knew where you were at all
Definitely,
times.
yes.
Now you mentioned that your father, because of his knowledge and expertise, traveled.
Yes,
So each time he would have to get a passport from city A to city B, and then to come back, he'd have to get a passport to come back to city A. Is that correct?
No.
No,
He
that
would-
one was good then.
he would get a passport. Let's say he went to Hungary or Czechoslovakia. He would get a passport. He would get pictures for the trip. He would be given a passport. But when he returned from the trip, from let's say Budapest or Prague, he would have to leave the passport with the police.
I see. Really, Big Brother knew where you were all
Yes, they
the
knew.
time. Now, when did your father die? Your mother was left alone. without your
Yes,
father.
he died in 1959 after a trip in Prague where he was a member of the jury at a classical music festival. He had intestinal occlusion and he died on the operating table. The doctor, the surgeon, was not a good one because he was supposed to be operated on by a different surgeon. The surgeon had been arrested because police found gold coins in his apartment. So he was arrested for a while, so he could not operate on my father. So somebody else operated on him, and he didn't eliminate enough of the, what do I call it in English? No, of the
Was this part of
the intestine.
intestine? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
And
that was-
and he did another surgery, and my father died on the surgery table.
So, how did your mother continue to provide for you and your brother?
She took a job as a research librarian because prior to this, she had not been working. And from my father, my brother and I received a pension, which was a sizable pension. which was to be continued until you graduate from college and had a job.
Oh,
At that time, the pension would be stopped.
I see. Once you were independent.
Right.
I see. So, now you told us that your goal was to leave.
Yes.
So what did you do about that?
I applied for a visa for Israel because I would have liked to go to France, for example. But Israel was the only country I could have gone to. So I applied, and I was approved. I went to Israel. I became a member of an ulpan. Ulpan is a school where you learn Hebrew and also get used to the lifestyle in Israel. They told you a lot of things. Of course, you are not all knowledgeable with the life in Israel, but then you got a job and you get used to the customs of Israel.
Now is this a 6-month Ulpan?
No, the month, it's a year.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I was the only communist. They used to call me the commie. The rest were from Canada and United States, Turkey, France.
Uh-huh. Well, going to the Ulpan, I guess, changed your life also.
Yes, I had a very good time. I could dance the twist. I could drink Coca-Cola, which was considered an imperialist, a capitalist drink. And I was called on stage when I was in high school to be admonished that I went to party where I twisted my body with this dance and where I drank all the time capitalist drinks like Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola.
Wow. You know, we take so much for granted. We make our decisions and follow through.
At the Ulpan, I met my husband, who was
Yes.
from Chicago, and after 5 months, we got married
In Israel?
and we left for the United States, for Chicago.
I see. So Bob won.
Yes.
Did you want to stay in Israel?
No.
No, you were using it as a stepping stone?
Yes.
I see. Okay, so you came to Chicago, and what did you do then?
For a while, I stayed with my in-laws and with Bob. Then we got an apartment, and I got a job as teacher at a high school.
Is that Whitney Young? Is that
First, there was a different high school.
Oh, I see.
But later, I organized a French and a Spanish program at the elementary school, kindergarten through 8th. And after that, I taught for 14 years at the special high school where only children or students with a certain IQ and a certain grade average were allowed to attend.
I see. And you speak a few languages. Do you
Yes.
know that? Do you want to tell us?
Yes, when I was 9, I had a tutor for French. When I was 10, I studied Russian, and that was compulsory in school. I was in 4th grade, and I took it for 7 years until I graduated from high school. And I was very good, and I get very high grades. But unlike many other foreign languages that I studied, Russian was considered the language of the enemy. So, although I knew the grammar and the vocabulary, I did not end up being able to read in original literature from Russia. I read a lot in translation. It's beautiful, but not in Russian. Also, when I was 11, I studied English, which I took all the way through high school. And then, of course, I went to college to study English. You are not allowed to go, for example, to an English-speaking country to practice, to see other sides. So that was the situation. However, I worked for 2 exhibits, one for Great Britain, another one for Denmark, where I was an interpreter, and I had a very good time. And then I worked at an exhibit for Denmark, and also I translated one of the episodes of The Saint, the series.
Yes, the episode of The Saint. The series, The Saint. Oh, he didn't know. When you were so successful with your work in Denmark, were you approached to perhaps do something for the government?
Yes, I was, but it didn't have anything to do with Denmark. I worked as an interpreter for the Danish industry and for Great Britain, but it didn't have anything to do with the way I was approached by a member of the Secret Service who came to my house and suggested to join the secret police. I mean, I was a teacher, but I was supposed to listen to what people would say, people I worked with, and report any enemy-like statements. And there were a lot of people who did that. But my mother was in a neighboring room, so I told this person representing the Securitate, which would be like FBI. And I told her that my mother suffered from a liver disease, and that would prevent me to join this organization, which would have been horrible.
Of course. Didn't you wonder how many people around you perhaps were doing this?
A lot of people. You never knew who your neighbor was. Like, we had a very nice neighbor couple, and the husband, they were retired. The husband worked for embassies, Romanian embassies in foreign countries, and he was an accountant, but he also reported to the secret police. I found out about that indirectly because you don't discuss those things.
Mm-hmm.
But when we socialized with his family, nothing was said.
Mm-hmm. While your father was living, because of his standing in the community, because of his expertise, there were some benefits for
Yes.
you. You mentioned some very nice vacations.
Wonderful. During the Royal Kingdom, which was Romania, and one of the queens was a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and she married a German prince, and she became Queen of Romania. They had palaces and castles and vacation, big houses. And after they were deposed, the Composers Union, the Writers Union, the Painters Union were given access to some of these places, so you were able to spend your vacation 2 weeks or 3 weeks in these wonderful places. And there was this place where we spent 2 weeks for winter vacation, and we used the flatware and the dining room service that had belonged to the Queen.
Not bad. It was a nice little extra. Yes. So there were a lot of people who had some pretty good things happening in their lives, even though they didn't have the freedom. When I'm wondering, since it was difficult for the Jewish people, what was it like for the Catholics? Because religion is not something the communists would promote.
Plus, then Marx and Engels thought that religion is opium for the masses, so it was not encouraged. Catholics would go to church, I don't know how often, but there were spies in churches, in synagogues, who would write down the names of the attendees and how often they would come to church, and that was reported to the FBI. So they knew of it. They wouldn't arrest them, but everybody had a dossier. So in the dossier they would mark down that such and such person attended Catholic prayer services. The same thing with the synagogues. We did not attend the synagogue because of my father's position, because attending a synagogue would have damaged his position.
I see. So observing your religion was not acceptable. What about the Romanis?
Romanis were also the gypsies.
Yes.
And they were not incorporated in the society. Once they tried to offer them apartments, but the gypsies ruined these apartments. I'm not going to get into details, but they did some bad stuff on the parquet floors. They defecated on the parquet floors. So the party or the servants came clean and they were thrown out of these places. They would be seen at various corners, selling flowers, selling pots and pans, and guessing your future in your palm. But they were leading a nomad-like life.
So when they were behaving inappropriately in these apartments, it doesn't sound like they were defiant. It was just that since they were nomads, they weren't accustomed to living in apartments, and they had no experience in that. Sad. That was sad.
We were instilled fears of the Romani or gypsies, and if a child behaved badly, the parents would threaten with sending the child with the gypsies and never be seen again. And that was a threat, of course, for somebody who was 5 years old or 9 years old, and then you believed it. But not all parents were stupid like that.
Wow, what a story, what a life you had. You had some great opportunities, education, but you had so many restrictions in your life. It's amazing, and I thank you so much. I want to leave a little time for questions. Oh, come on. Where are the questions?
Is there a large Jewish population, and if so, how were they treated? Was there anti-Semitism, or just what actually?
There was anti-Semitism. Like my father was very lucky because he had those jobs, but many times you couldn't advance in regular jobs, accountant, engineer. You couldn't advance, and you became a member of the Communist Party, so that would open a path to a better life. Not everybody was allowed to join, but those who were allowed to join had these benefits.
That's interesting. I didn't know that they would welcome Jews.
Yes.
That is very interesting. I can see why, if you want to take care of your family and you want to provide some of the things that we'd like to provide for a family, I suppose you join. Now, when you say join the Communist Party, what did that require him to do? He says, I'm a communist, and now what do?
You participated in Communist Party meetings. You went to parades whenever they had special events that were connected with, for example, the victory of the Soviets over the Germans. So you had a big parade for that. Also, there were meetings at your place of work. So, like I said, you had to be careful not to open your mouth, because you never know.
It's like passing as though he bought into it, that it was something that he wanted to participate in.
Yes.
Difficult. We have some more questions? Okay, Brady.
Now, when did you get married and when did you come to the United States?
In 1970,
You got married.
the 28th of September.
And when did you come to the United States?
I came to the United States, I think, 4 months later.
More questions? This is a very quiet audience, but I can imagine this is a lot to take in. Yes. Good for you.
How did the war impact on you and your country, actually? Because I don't know exactly where Romania stood during the war and whether they were.
I wasn't born during the wars, but I was born when there were wars in Israel, and it didn't impact us because you didn't listen to the news. My mother would listen to the news on the radio, but she had to close all the doors and be very careful and lower the volume on the radio. My grandfather worked, a great-grandfather worked, he was a member, pardon me, he fought in the First World War, and he was taken prisoner by the Germans. And at that time, of course, he returned. He said, the Germans are terrible, and from what he commented on and what he told, I mean, not me because I wasn't born, it gave you a window for the way the Germans behaved in the Second World War.
Now, when you went to Israel, did your mother stay in Romania?
She stayed behind because I wanted to go by myself.
Okay. But did she ever go to Israel?
She went to Israel a year later with my brother, and she lived there until she died.
Oh,
I
so
would send tickets. She came to Chicago many times. And at one point, my brother did not return, and I was afraid because graduating from college, he would have been sent in the army, and we were concerned about him being in the army. So he graduated from high school, and he stayed with us, with my husband and me. And my mother went back to Israel.
I see. So, and she died there.
Yes, she died there in 2001 when the tragedy happened in New York.
Oh my.
Yes.
Really? Yeah. So have you been back to Romania?
I didn't want to go back to Romania for many, many years because it left, even though I had a good life, it left a bitter taste in my mouth. All these urges to become a member of the secret police, and I was afraid, I was wary. But in 2003, since they had a classical music festival which had been created by my father, I went to the concerts with friends, and I spent about 2.5 weeks. Romania already was no longer under the communist yoke, so I had a good time. But you never knew always what could happen, because the secret police continue to exist, not for the communists, but for the new government. And from what I understand, they had freedom of expressions, they could get any jobs, they had passports and could travel. The police organizations were existing, and you could get in trouble.
Now, you mentioned going back for this music festival. This is a festival that your father originated?
Yes.
Was it acknowledged that it was your father who had started it?
It was acknowledged only at the beginning, because the first event was in 1958, a year before he died. When I went in 2003, there was no mention of my father, as if he never existed. His books were not displayed, so he was forgotten. On purpose.
On purpose.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Well, that's sad.
And you did not have any Jew in this festival making big decisions, being member of the jury for the canto contest, for the piano and violin contest. No way.
And this was the time the communists weren't there.
Exactly.
And still there was anti-Semitism.
Yes. And there still is.
I see. Have you had any contact with anyone that you knew there before you left Romania?
Yes, I contacted a friend of mine from high school, but she told me that in order to advance, she had joined the Communist Party. This was before communists were out of the government, and I was wary about it, even though nothing could have happened to me. But she joined the Communist Party for advantages. She got a better job. She worked in the conservatory. Her husband was the director of the conservatory. She joined the teaching staff at the conservatory. So there were benefits.
I guess people have to make decisions,
Yes.
and they're probably very hard decisions. But again, we as human beings have the need for survival. And sometimes we have to adjust our values and do that. Last chance, any questions? Great.
I'm not sure I remember how to pronounce Nikolai.
Nicolae Ceausescu.
What I want to know is, did you rejoice when he was executed?
Very much so.
I bet.
He was a shoemaker. His wife was a cleaning lady, and because of the belonging to the Communist Party, and because of the fact that they participated in all kinds of communist movements, they got to become president of Romania, and she was the first lady of Romania. They got worse as time went by. He had a group of Libyans who watched over him in case somebody tried to assassinate him. He did not pay attention to the signs that Romanians were fed up. There were situations, similar situations in Hungary, in Albania, in Bulgaria. The president of Bulgaria was very wise because before turmoil started in Bulgaria, he went to South America. Goodbye, Bulgaria. Ceausescu, he saw that nobody would touch him, and he was executed by a committee. They were shot. But before that, they had a wonderful life. They traveled to various countries. He had made his sinks of 18-karat gold. He had Persian rugs in this palace because he lived in a palace. Also, he went to England. When he went to England, he stole some things. And the Queen told future queens or kings or presidents of the respective countries to watch out for him because he would like something and he would take it with him to Romania.
Didn't he have gold toilets too? Gold
Yes, he
toilet
did.
seats?
Yeah.
Last call. Absolutely last call. This has been fascinating. I think many of us had no clue of what it was like living in parts of Europe in those days. And I thank you very, very much.
It was my pleasure.
Before you leave, there is a sign-up sheet there. As I said, we have openings in January. There are a lot of people coming forward, and I thank you. You're all so very interesting. Thank you.